Welcome to the next module where we talk about becoming unconquerable. A while ago I was talking with a friend, and this is when COVID-19 was just starting to take off, and my friend is in the Air Force. He's up there in rank. He's been in the military now for going on 20 years, and he was speaking with a relative. This relative was feeling a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. My friend was telling me that his relative was basically living in this state of extreme anger and frustration, and he was losing his temper and frustrations with his family members, with the people around him. And because of that, it was damaging relationships. He's an entrepreneur, so it was hurting his business. It was hurting the relationships with his employees and his customers. And it was impacting his health. So living in a state of anger, of frustration, of disappointment, this state of looking for an enemy to kill, a target, to take out frustrations, impacted him on many different levels. And if he was an awakened warrior, somebody who wanted to create change inside this world, who was legitimately willing to step up to the plate to create change, then was he coming from a place of empowerment, power? Was he standing in a place that would make him a good leader? Was he coming from a place that would inspire people to listen to him, that would inspire people to want to follow him? That I don't want to follow, I'm not going to put myself in a place of following anybody who does not have mastery over themselves. Somebody who fights from anger is fighting or coming from a place of intense emotion, and therefore is not effective in their decision making and their actions. So this is where we get into becoming unconquerable. So the importance of gaining emotional mastery, of becoming unconquerable, is that rapport with another person, your ability to connect with another person and keep them engaged in conversation or wanting to communicate with you, it comes from our ability to stay rational and neutral. If we break rapport with somebody, it's either because we want to, or it's because we don't want to be connected to that person. We don't want to be tied to that person, so we break rapport with them. And if somebody is coming from an extremely emotional place, and the other person doesn't feel that level of emotion, you either have to be an extremely good communicator, or that person is not going to listen to you. So always gaining that ability to come from an emotionally stable ground is going to give us the ability to create rapport, where we can start building relationships with people and talking in a way where they may want to give us their attention. So emotional mastery, developing emotional mastery, means that we get to have the side benefit of creating more influence in the people that we work with. It leads to better relationships with the people around us, our family members, our co-workers, the people closest, which leads to a more joyful and happy life. I mean, it's kind of like a snowball effect, is that as we start gaining emotional mastery, the things around us kind of settle down. If you imagine a very active ocean in the middle of a storm, and the waves crashing, you know, a boat on that water is going to have a hard time navigating where it's going, but if that water is calm, it's much easier to set the boat in a direction and to travel, to meet our destination. So what happens if you don't have emotional mastery? We lose our cool in confrontations. So that means that if we are trying to talk to somebody about alternative information or about some kind of an issue, we lose the ability to remain neutral and calm inside of a conversation. And instantly we either trigger the fight or flight response in the other person, or it turns into an argument, a battle of wills into who's right and who's wrong, or the other person may leave. And one of the most important things when we started this, I told you, I said, one of the most important things about communicating with other people, it's not about what we know. but it's about how we make the other person feel. So when we're coming from this place where we don't have emotional mastery, we can respond to people in ways that leave pain. Where that person, whenever they think about you, they're going to think about that painful thing that you said, where we respond from this place of not being rational, emotionally stable. Most common experiences that people have with this is you think about relationships, arguments between couples, where one person does not have a lid on emotional mastery. And you think about how that person reacts and the damage that does to relationships and families. And ultimately, when we look at ourselves on this planet, we are ultimately one very large family, are we not? And communication could be one of the core issues that we are struggling with today. We don't know how to communicate our differences to resolve the issues that we're facing. When we don't have emotional mastery, we let emotions dictate our behavior. That means as an example, if someone is feeling sad and depressed, they're not going to want to engage with somebody who may need their support at that time. If someone is feeling anger, they respond with anger. And alternatively, if we are coming from a place of extreme joy and we just let all of that out at one place, that usually leads to a dip. So emotional mastery does not mean that we run around full of happiness and joy all the time. It means that we manage the peaks and the valleys. It means that we learn how to take the emotional roller coaster that we experience, the ups and the downs, and we make it steady. When we dive low, we know how to correct and to pull back out. And so if we don't have emotional mastery, sometimes we can lose the respect of our peers or others. And all of this leads to not being a leader, not being a person that can help guide us towards this positive evolution, this abundance that we all want. Being an awakened warrior means that we come from this place of being centered and in wholeness. And emotional mastery is one of the key parts of that. So what happens if you do develop emotional mastery? You become more influential in the people that you're dealing with. You're able to remain neutral and calm and come from a rational viewpoint when you're discussing topics with people that would normally incite anger and rage. An example of this is the other day I saw Del Bigtree, the producer of the Highwire Report and also the producer of the movie Vaxxed. And he was having a debate with a very well-known attorney who was working towards an alternative ideology. Basically promoting the fact that we do not own our bodies and that forced vaccination is a must. And Del Bigtree, during this conversation, during this debate, Del was able to remain emotionally neutral. He displayed emotional mastery. And because of the emotional mastery, he was able to present himself in very calm and rational ways, which was extremely, extremely powerful to watch. So we become more influential. We gain the ability to have the hard conversations with people. And this isn't just about awakening people to truth, it's also about having the difficult conversations with people about the realities of life. It means that when we're talking to them about things that may trigger us, we're able to stay neutral and helpful to that other person. People will sense that talking with you is a safe place. You are a safe place for them to have a conversation, a difficult conversation that maybe they can't have with just about anybody else. And it'll also help you pull yourself out of funk faster, which leads to all kinds of positive benefits inside of your life. So what stops people from gaining emotional mastery? Well, ego that runs our mind. And I know a lot of people, it's like, well, what is ego? There's so many different variations out there of what ego is. And when I say ego, what I mean by that, it's the identification with the mind. It's the identification with our past. It's the identification with our anticipated future. It's identification with the chatter. That is ego. What else stops people from gaining emotional mastery is having a toxic or unhealthy body. One of the foundations for having a healthy mind, being able to operate inside of this world, is to eliminate toxins from our body and to come from a place of power. That means building vibrant energy inside of our bodies. And there are lots of ways to do this, and there's lots of ways to end up with a toxic, unhealthy body. And so if we want to develop emotional mastery, first we must realize that the outside world has an impact on how our body functions. And having a clean and solid body, our body is our instrument to interact inside of this reality. And so we have to take care of how our body operates and functions. And that means feeding it the right foods, giving the body what it needs in order to operate at peak efficiency and vibrant energy. Where do we get that energy from? And what else stops us from emotional mastery? The next thing that stops us from emotional mastery is trauma. It's trauma that's happened in our past. It's trauma that's happened to our society. It's trauma that happened to our ancestors. You know, trauma has been shown to be transmitted through our DNA, which means that our ancestors who may have experienced who knows what horrific things in the past, that those traumas are carried down through our DNA on a cellular level. And the traumas that happen to us as children, while we're still developing, from unhealthy relationships, from people abusing us in different ways, these kinds of things leave lasting impacts in how we interpret the world, our belief systems about ourselves, how we operate. Those recurring thoughts, those subconscious programs that are running in the background will always impact our emotional mastery in the world today. Meaning that if you are experiencing anxiety, stress, depression, any of these things on a repeated pattern, it most likely has something to do with the program or something that came from childhood. And learning how to heal ourselves of this poison, the poison within ourselves, how to eliminate that. It's something that we've lost as our culture has moved forward. We've lost these old traditions that were put into place in order to help people release the burden, the baggage. Because the version of Nate that is standing here on camera right now is not the same person that existed 7 years ago. That person was different. I was aware, my awareness was there, but the person that I inhabited was a different person. And today, standing before you, I am a different person. And when you watch this, if you reach out to me and we talk, at that point in time, different person. If we carry our past with us, the baggage gets heavier and heavier as we go on. Now look, there's a part of this reality living here on this planet where we're always going to have a past, we're always going to have an experience. And the reality is that we can't let go of all of it. And if you can, you are extremely enlightened. What we need to learn to do is to do the best that we can with what we have and where we're at. And that's what I'm saying gaining emotional mastery will do for you. So another thing that stops us from developing emotional mastery are bad habits. I chewed tobacco and smoked for nearly a decade. And there's inside of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, he speaks about how cigarettes, they break down our resistance to negative habits. You know, as we lose our willpower to wanting that next cigarette or that next tobacco or the next whatever, Twinkie, we lose the internal fortitude and discipline to push ourselves to achieve the things that need to be achieved in order for us to have the impact that we want to have. And that's just a small example of how habits can lead us down a path where we lose that emotional mastery. Mastery is, emotional mastery comes from mastery over self. And if we can't say no to a physical object or input that we need on our body or in our body, then how are we going to push ourselves when it gets tough? It's like when you're running, when you're going for a run. I love running. And when I'm running in the woods, sometimes I'm climbing a long ascent. My body tells me, "You're tired, Nate, stop." Well, what is it when we're at that point that keeps us running, that keeps us moving through? It's that that energy and the persistence to move forward. Another thing that keeps us from emotional mastery is repeated stress patterns. That means living inside of an environment that isn't conducive to health, that isn't conducive to moving in a positive direction. That means if we have a job that we absolutely despise, if we work with somebody who doesn't who is constantly crushing our soul, if we live in an environment with somebody who takes advantage of us, if we accept these things inside of our environment and we're living underneath that stress, we begin to lose confidence in ourselves and our ability to make decisions, and because of that, emotional mastery erodes. So what does it take to develop emotional mastery? First of all, emotional mastery takes time. Emotional mastery develops over the course of our lifetime. But there are very real things and actions that we can take now in the present moment in order to significantly increase the amount of emotional mastery that we achieve over the course of our lifetime. We can make light year jumps in a very short amount of time. And when we take those steps, we are well rewarded for our efforts. Thomas Paine said, "That which we obtain too easily, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only which gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods." So discipline and persistence, keeping yourself accountable, quieting the ego, and getting to know yourself, getting present within yourself, healing and energizing the body, overcoming trauma at a deep level, and shifting those negative beliefs and thought patterns that plays over inside of our mind over and over again, developing good habits to replace the bad, and managing our life design to encourage growth and reduce stress. These are all things that we can do, we can implement inside of our life to help us move towards emotional mastery. So from that list that I just laid out, the list of things that we could do to gain emotional mastery, what's one? What's one that you could focus on? What's one that you could walk away with that would help impact the future of your life and your emotional mastery? So once we have mastered becoming unconquerable, we shift our focus from developing self, to helping develop others. In ancient Rome, this was a key skill that anybody who is moving towards a certain degree of leadership or impact had to master. Learning these skills was an honored tradition. Let's jump into the next module where you find out about this key skill that was so important to Roman emperors and philosophers of all kinds. Let's jump into that next module.